Alright, you got me. I'm not actually dead. Although, I guess it would feel like that. Being gone for 9 months and all that. Man, I could have made life in that time. Wow. No, I'm not actually dead. I'm just a bunch of other negative words which you could most likely imagine. But dead, I'm not. Death is, in fact, kinda subjective, in some sense. Is the Roman Empire dead? Yeah, kinda. Is Joe Biden dead? No, as I record in this video. Are my pot plants dead? Well, just some water and some sun and some prayers. I'll do it tomorrow though, it's gonna be fine. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that some people call things dead, even though they aren't, while other people are in denial of things being dead, even though they are. And yes, if you are a true gamer, you've called at least 5 games dead this week, even though they aren't. Now, I can already hear you typing about, oh well, isn't it about subjectivity? Wouldn't it be more along the lines of I the beholder instead of just you said it, therefore it's true? Well, first off, everything I say is the truth. And second of all, there has to be some limits to this subjectivity. As an example, some people call Fortnite a dead game. Fortnite is not a dead game. I almost don't want to explain why. On the other hand, I'm sure there's a bunch of small, minor games with a few people who are still attached to it claiming that the glory days isn't over, it's still going on. That game? No way. CS2, you're not playing it because it's mainstream. Real men play CS Condition 0. There is clearly such a thing as a dead game, and seemingly therefore also a living game, I guess. So there must be some points, or at least some factors, which makes a game playable and unplayable, alive and dead. Something that gives soul and takes away the soul of a game. I'm gonna go in there myself and understand this very dilemma, this question which haunts any older or troubled game. What is a dead game? But to fully understand this process, surely we must first understand this question. What is a game that can die? The first one is too abstract and dumb, and listen, I have very few brains to spare. I can't waste it on those kind of questions. While there are some games that die just a tad too quickly, there are also games that just stand the test of time, seemingly never dying. A good example of this is Pong, the very first video game, which has stood the test of time since forever. Not the most exciting case, but it is a case nonetheless. Now, I guess some people could argue that the reason why Pong has become so popular still today is because of its popularity, the history, the meaning behind it, the simplicity. I mean, even your parents know what Pong is. And while that could be, and probably is, true, I think another factor one isn't really thinking about is the fact that Pong is a single player game. You can just play it on your own with the computer, which actually says a lot. Big surprise, I'm not the first person who thought about this question, when does video games die? And it seems that there's a large group of people out there who agree that single player games just can't die, since as long as you have the game and then something to play it on, it can in principle be played forever and the game would be just the same, rather than had a million fans or just you. Of course, unless it runs on official servers, which can be shut down, but that's just a rather niche case that isn't really gonna happen, so don't look into it, it's no matter. Single player games just can't die, because as long as you have the two factors needed, a game and somewhere to play the game, you can in principle play the game until the end of time. Nothing can stop you. If anything, you could perhaps talk about the fact that popularity, or rather the lack thereof, of a game could kill it. If a single player game used to have 1 million players who owned the game and now only had 100, would that game be dead by comparison? Now some might say yes, since the game has gone on quite the decline, but I would say no. Even though apparently half the web would agree with you. But I'm still gonna say no, because a single player game cannot be affected by popularity. There is a large group of people out there who call certain types of single player games dead because they have fallen to such a low popularity amount that surely it's dead now, right? Well, I'm gonna say this school of thought is run on the doctrine called negativity, because negative opinions is pretty much just a coal to the engine that is the gaming industry. It is everywhere. Now, a game doesn't become unplayable, aka dead, just because other people have stopped playing the game. As long as you can play the game is playable and therefore not dead. All games have their ups and downs. Everything does, really. And even if a game declines to such a low point like this, it still is a playable game. It still isn't dead. Don't believe me? Take this rather weird comparison I'm about to show you. Here is Fred, aka Lucas Cruikshank, weird name, as he actually goes by, back from, 2012. Now, this guy has seen some more popular days, but just because he isn't popular anymore doesn't mean that he isn't dead. I think. Let me just check that for a minute. No, still alive, still works. Looking at Fred, I can pretty much guarantee that he has seen a more active fan base and have made more money in the past. His glory days are clearly over. But the Fred content is still out there. It's still watchable if you want to go back and see it or study the past on YouTube. Fun fact, brain rot was always a thing. But Fred teaches us something very important. Just because something is old and no longer popular doesn't mean that it still can't be enjoyed. The same goes for games. Yeah, sure, Lego Battles have seen some better days. It has in fact hardly even seen good days in the first place, but still, a game I can boot up on my DS and play. So no, that wouldn't be a dead game. Even though no one talks about it, the community is more or less non-existent and isn't really being sold anymore, except again the guy from the creepy corner. So no, single player games don't really seem to be able to die out, at least in the sense that you can't play it anymore. And calling it dead just because it isn't popular anymore is ridiculous, as it uses the word dead in a rather misleading way. Something is only dead once it is completely not there. A game is only dead once you can completely not play it. You can still play your 20-year-old copy of Mario to the Nintendo who the fuck knows, because it is still there, it is still playable, therefore it isn't a dead game. Calling the popularity dead would make more sense, or just calling the game abandoned would make a lot more sense, because that doesn't talk about the game in itself, but the popularity of it, which you can shit on all you want. It is also way more or less pessimistic, which, again, gaming needs that. However, when people call games, and especially single player games, dead, they also sometimes refer to a franchise, or a series, being dead. Which is something I can get more behind. That actually makes more sense. Franchises die out seemingly more often than games does, which mainly comes from the fact that a franchise is way more easy to kill than a game is. Take, for example, one of my personal favorite series and franchises as a child, the Mario and Luigi series. Oh, the memories. These games have a good story, great characters, and some nice gameplay. I especially like the soundtrack, but again, my music taste has been utterly ruined by listening to official soundtracks for way too long. But if I'm not supposed to enjoy the music, then why the hell is Luigi jamming out to it? I mean, I'm just like him. The games are still fun, and I sometimes even go back to play them every once in a while, even though they are old. But the franchise itself is dead. The games are still playable, but the franchise is dead. This mainly comes from the fact that a franchise has to release new games in a steady pace in order to actually be alive. Otherwise, it's inactive and therefore dead. And that would have fit this series if it wasn't for the fact that just as I began editing this video some time ago, they released a new fucking game. It's now back. What? That completely ruins my fucking script. Well, kinda. The point still stands. The game was dead for, over 10 years? So, the point still stands, alright? But it did majorly fuck over my script. So let's just act like that didn't happen. Pretty please. So yeah, a franchise can still die. They do that all the time. This mainly comes from the fact that a franchise, unlike a video game, have to release new games constantly to be active and alive. If a franchise hasn't been going for 10 years and still isn't going to, then I'm sorry, that franchise is just dead. The games in the franchise can still be alive, but the franchise as a thing is not gonna be active anymore. So that's just how it is. A game has to be active to be not dead, and the same goes for a series. However, a single player game, like these games, will always be not dead. You can always play them as long as you have, again, the cartridge and DS or whatever you play it on. While the franchise can only be alive by the development of it. That's the key difference. And these games had a very discomforting end, with Alpha Dream, the developers, going bankrupt and the last game being a huge flop and one of, if not the, worst selling Mario game ever. Ironically being a remake of their most successful game in the franchise. The game is still good, I actually have it, but it was the game that finished off the series, sadly. Therefore, it's way easier for a franchise to die than a game, since a franchise have to keep moving to be alive, and a video game can just be itself and be alive. And this goes for many other game franchises as well, like Costume Quest, Little Big Planet, Castlevania, and of course,
Burnout Revenge for the PS2.
So yeah, franchises die pretty easily. Video games, especially the single player, not that much. So the next time someone calls a single player game dead, just laugh at him, just point and laugh. But what about multiplayer games? If you want to play Monopoly or chess, you're gonna need someone to play with, and not just be on your own. Otherwise, you just can't play the game. The same goes for all multiplayer games, in essence. And while board games can usually be played with AI online, multiplayer games that run on servers like Fortnite, Valorant, TF2, CSGO, World of Warcraft, Bubbly.io, and I could go on, don't really have an option. And even if they do, then it usually sucks ass. Like, a real multiplayer game can only be played with other people. Even PvE usually needs other people to be fully played, sadly. So even when the AI is pretty good, it is preferable with other people, if not necessary. That being both a big upside, but also their biggest downside. For you see, if people stop playing a certain game, or the player numbers go too low, it's simply going to be impossible to play the game. Some games simply need activity to be playable. Now this might come as quite obvious for some. I mean, I could have just said if the game servers die, then the game dies. Which is also true, but that rarely never happens. If ever. However, it does lead us to a very important part of this video. The fact that the player base can sometimes be more important for a game's survival than the state of the game itself. A game's community really does mean a lot for a game. Not only is it a perfect reflection into what type of people actually play that game, it's also the very lifeblood that keeps the game itself alive. It's in the community that the very essence, opinion, and mind of the people who play the game can be found. And the game developers thrive on this. They know the importance of the community. Mostly. Sometimes. Okay, maybe not, but it can change. It can change. Sometimes game companies just give the player base a cold shoulder, but mostly they don't really have an option to do anything but listen to the community. If there is something wrong with the game, the community is sure to tell them exactly what is wrong and even potentially how to fix it. Now, when it comes to the competitive or even the esports side of a game, if it even has one, I mean, how the hell are they gonna make esport Mario Party? Talking to the community is essential, as the developers usually don't have the same insight into how the game gets played on such a level as the top playing fans does. Now, to bring the power of the community into play, I would like to show you an example of a game you know and probably even love. That being Minecraft. Now, most of you have most likely forgotten this period in Minecraft history, but it was called in a quite dramatic and over-the-top way the Dark Ages of Minecraft, which lasted from 2014 to 2017. Now, before 14, Minecraft was a quite popular game with a big fan base, and everyone could enjoy it, especially kids. And after 17, the exact same, just a bit bigger, grander, and bigger, and more. I said bigger already. So what happened in these dark ages? No, the church didn't rule over Europe in this time of period, but rather it was a time where people looked at Minecraft, or more specifically, those who played Minecraft, more negatively. It was seen as a cringe game, only cringe kids and cringe babies would play. And you know, not the bright kids, more like the glue eaters. In other words, Minecraft simply got an image problem, mainly from those who played the games, kids. These dark times apparently ended in 2017 for some reason, and ever since, we look differently on the game and those who play it. Why? Well, one specific reason doesn't really seem to come to mind, but more like a giant factor of things, slowly changing the image of the game, where Minecraft again became a game that everyone could enjoy, like we see today. It was mainly from YouTubers like PewDiePie who played it on their channels, and almost collectively, people just began to play it again, as fond memories came back from those who used to play it, and those who hadn't played before got a warm welcome to the game. Now, the game might not have been dying, or by far dead, but it was still standing still, and not really evolving that much. It was after this jump in 2017 that the game skyrocketed to the most played game ever, and it's the game it is today. All because of a community problem which the community fixed themselves about the community, rather be on purpose or not, most likely just not. All without the developers having an acting role even once. This proves that the community can have a huge impact on the game, both positively and negatively, at the same time. There are even some instances where the community of a game is the very reason why a game or a whole franchise has become popular in the first place, and it's the very thing that has kept it alive. For some, the real reason why the people are even fans of the game and its community is not the games themselves, but purely the community. And for that, only one game or franchise come to mind, that being Touhou. Now, I might be lynched for saying this, but I'm a bit of a Touhou fan myself. And that is by no means because of the games themselves, and I'm sure that goes for around 90% of the fanbase. It's even a bit of a running joke that Touhou fans haven't actually played the Touhou games. It took me a few years before I even played or bought my first Touhou games. Yes, I own Embodiment of Scarlet Devil and Subterranean Animism, and yes, I suck at the games, and I bought them legally. I know you didn't. In fact, I'm almost certain that you, yourself, have run into the community at some point in your life without even knowing what the games are or even are about. Now, this strange phenomenon all comes from the mastermind behind the games themselves, Yunya Ota, aka Sun, who is the single man behind the games, still to this day. The entire development team and company is literally just him and a couple of empty peers. Sun took up the ludicrous but extremely effective business model of just not doing anything at all, and giving the game some rather limited, if not non-existing copyright laws, which means that people can just use Touhou characters as they please. They can make their own music, own clips, own projects, and even their own games completely without backlash. Almost, not backlash. This has evolved Touhou to a point where it is no longer the games that are in the center, but the community, where the official games are just the original source material for the whole new official stuff and characters that might come out. Now, what got me into the Touhou community was the music, which is banging by the way, but especially the fan-made music, which is really well made. Again, my music taste is fucked. Now, this business model has made a weird scenario where anything could happen to the games or Sun, and the community would just keep it alive. Not only could they just make new Touhou games, but also keep the official ones just alive and well known through the community. This again proves that the community can have a lot of influence over a game. Of course, this is a bit of an unusual, if not radical example. I mean, Sun pretty much just gave the community power, which never happens. I can almost guarantee you that EA games like FIFA and Madden gets like a slither of the power and voice that Sun has given Touhou. It's quite obvious that a community has something to say when it comes to a game being alive or dead. Even if that balance between the community and development team can vary wildly, but no one can deny that the community can be quite important when it comes to letting a game slowly die out, or slowly staying afloat, or even making a grand comeback. Yet the development team should not be denied their crucial, if not to some degree, more important role to a game's stability. It really has to go both ways. A game can't really keep growing if the devs have abandoned it, not fixing issues and updating the game, just like how a game isn't gonna go too far without a good community behind it, which can spread the popularity of the game and keep people entertained and get people to be interested in the game as a whole. Now, I know that on paper this might be seen as kind of ridiculous. Would a game not just need a player base to be alive? Well, yes, but as these different kind of scenarios have shown us, it all really revolves around these two factors. The community and the development team have to either work together somehow, or be very effective on their own. If either of these fail, then so will the game itself. A community and a dev team comes in many shapes and sizes, some good, effective, or special, but they're both needed to balance out the progress of the game. Now, when it comes to interesting game developments and communities surrounding dying games, there's only one game I'm really thinking about. Take this as a kind of final test to see how the community and the development team have to both be in order for a game to work. Now, unless you've been living under some kind of gigantic rock, all these questions should have rung a bell in your head, since Team Fortress 2 is a game that has been talked about a lot, which is either dying or a dead game according to pretty much everyone. Especially as the writing of this script, where fix.tf has been going around pretty much everywhere and around everyone, spreading the word of how you should fix TF2, or we should, or Valve should, or just someone, please. That game has seen way better days, no one is denying that. The game has one of those rare scenarios where everyone can agree that the game has seen better days in many ways, but people still disagree on what to actually do, or rather what should happen. After all, they don't control the game development. A big majority of the people want the game fixed, which comes in many ways. Mainly it's just comes in the form of Valve, the creators, doing just literally anything. An update, a working anti-cheat. Hell, people are starving for a developer. That's how deep in the mud this game has come. And then there's this weird side of that TF2 scenario which wants to see the game just die out, weirdly enough. And I'm not talking about the bot hosters, even though that is pretty much their entire job, to ruin the game to a point of being unplayable. But mainly I'm talking about kill TF2, the opposite of save TF2, who sees people who try to fix the game or save the game as just being Redditors who can't let go of the past, are obnoxious, annoying, and should just give up. And even though there is a lot of cinematic drama in the whole fix TF2 scenario, and some people might have gotten just a tad bit too emotionally attached to the game and the movement, acting as if no one has ever played the game for the past 6 years and saying that it has a huge impact on world culture, it hasn't. You can't really be in the side of Kill TF2 without also being one of these guys. I mean, Kill TF2 is just purely negativity, nothing else. It's kind of like a bunch of people being around a wounded dog, all wondering how they can help the dog recover, and then there's this one guy who just thinks we should just put out his misery, even though it's just broken a bone, and otherwise is quite healthy. But to be fair, I think that movement is just trying to get a rise out of people. If they really don't care about the game, then why are they always talking about it so actively? But yeah, even though this whole TF2 thing will go on for a long time, and has gone on for a long time, the game is still in this interesting limbo where people somehow can't agree on whether it is a dead game or a living game. And where the community is split, the game is split, and Valve is just absent. And to be honest, let's just talk honestly here, TF2 is not a dead game. I mean, really. Personally, I haven't had any major problems with playing this game in a while. The only dead thing about TF2 is RD Asteroid, which I really miss a lot. It was my first great memory of playing that game. It was very fun. I thought it was a good concept, and now it's gone forever, and I'll never be able to play it again on official Valve servers, and it really hurts my heart. Valve, please just fix that. Right now, I'm certain you can walk into any popular game mode and you can just play the game. It's only about that 10% of the time where the servers are actually overrun, if even, and the other 90% of the time that there is either no bots or so few bots that join that you can just kick them out instantly, which we do because the community has adapted so greatly to the situation that they just get insta-kicked, which is either amazing or kinda sad that we just adopted to the situation so greatly. And this isn't even talking about the newest quote-unquote update for TF2, where bots are pretty much just absent. I haven't seen a single bot for days, neither has most people. But honestly, most TF2 players can spot a bot 10 miles away. They can probably smell them through the fucking screen at this point. But don't take me the wrong way, TF2 still has a huge problem, and I would say it is on the way of being a dying or even a killed game, as some might even say. It is in a dire need, but again, a dead game it is not. It still has those 30,000 players daily, which is more than enough to play the game. And then there are community servers, events, MVM, the community, and a lot more. Again, is it dying or not? Is the community dying or not? Is Valve even there? This game is like the final exam of understanding dying games. Now, for a bit of context that might help you understand the state of how bad or not bad this game is in, I'd like to compare TF2 to another game that you might not know, but might uncloud your vision. So, let's take a look at me. No, I've seen better days too, that's not what I meant, but look at my character. These things. The Bricktrons from Castle Story. Well, let me just say it like this. I'm a Castle Story fan. Now that is a game that has seen some better days. Some people might say this game already has a foot in the grave, if not both. If it wasn't for my view on single-player games not being able to die, then this game would be dead. Comparing this to Team Fortress 2 might prove that, first of all, TF2 isn't a dead game, and secondly, the community and development of a game is really, really important. Obviously, Again, I might have a slight bias here since I have based my entire internet personality on these small yellow idiots, but I digress. Have you heard of Castle Story? No? That might be reason number one, unless you do, in which case you probably haven't played the game in, let's say, 10 years? Anyways, veteran pass to you. Good taste in games. Castle Story is a game that has hardly ever peaked those 1,500 players back in 2014, and currently hardly ever peaks those 80 players on average a month. It never really had that big of a community in the first place, despite the fact that it had a generous Kickstarter donation and a quite popular trailer. Yet even from the get-go, we weren't really dealing with a giant here. Currently, if you want to play the game online, then just forget it, it literally isn't there. If you want to take a look at the community, then we have this on Steam. That's been there for a while. And then the Discord, where not much really happens. If you want to see the game grow, then sorry, the developers aren't just non-caring like Valve, they literally just doesn't exist anymore. It's currently just a title, no one is working at that company at all. So no updates or fixes for you, pal. Castle Story is what some would call a dead multiplayer game because the two spheres of interest are gone, and therefore the player count is hardly ever there. The entire company is just pretty much gone, and the community therefore has also just accepted its death and has moved on. And even those who are still left hardly ever talk about multiplayer. It does have a single player mode, which is the only thing that is keeping the game afloat, but that is also in a dire need of a lot of fixes and updates, which does scare people away from the game. Now, Castle Story can still lean back on the single player bit, and that is the only thing that is keeping this game afloat. So therefore the game can't really be run down to a state of unplayableness as long as you just can play it on your own. But that doesn't entirely overshadow the fact that otherwise, if Castle Story had no single player mode, it would be an unplayable game. This is an example of a dead multiplayer game. So going back to TF2, they can play single player. Well, they can play training, but I refuse to accept that as TF2. No one would ever play that. Comparing the two, one realized that TF2 can't be a dead game in its current state, and hasn't ever been. It could be way worse. If you're comparing the two games, then they're kinda similar on the development parts, in some way. Sure, Valve isn't dead, not by a long shot, but they're kinda ghosting the community and the game, knowing that something is wrong, but they don't really act on it. On the other hand, the communities could not be further apart. What really keeps TF2 alive, and always has, is the community. The community is way more active than the game itself. Like, way more active. The player base might not be that high, and has also only peaked at a shaky 250,000, even with bots. But the videos alone of this game can get millions of views. Sometimes hundreds of thousands of more views than the top player count ever had. Now how could this be? Some could say that TF2 fans are kinda icky about non-TF2 stuff. I mean, try and be a TF2ber and change the subject. Yeah, not gonna happen. However, people just watching the same video over and over again isn't the reason for these high view counts. Even if the same people were watching the same video 100 times, the video might not get those 100 views per person, because of how YouTube works. This means that there really is a way bigger community than the game itself. The community around the game is bigger than the community in the game, if you please. No matter where you go, it seems that everyone knows what TF2 is, and that they enjoy it, but they don't seem to be playing the game. It seems as if the TF2 community is way bigger than the game itself. Now why am I talking about this? Because this proves that the community is more important than some people give it credit for. A community can be the single thing that keeps a game going. You can kinda compare it to a popular series. A lot of people enjoy Breaking Bad, and the Breaking Bad memes are everywhere. But when was the last time you really watched the series? Yeah, it ended around 11 years ago, yet the community around it is still going strong. Now, of course, People are always, rewatching it or watching it for the first time and just getting into it, but mainly it's people who haven't watched the series for years. Or maybe haven't even watched the series at all, but just caught on to the community that just spiraled their way through memes. And then, Better Call Saul and the many spin-off movies and all that, but my point still stands, however. Some people are attracted to a community like Breaking Bad, or TF2, or Touhou, not because of what it is in itself, but the great universe, the creativity, the characters, and the humor that it has to offer. So in that way, sometimes the community is more powerful than the game itself, in a way. I feel like I'm beginning to sound like a broken record with all this "the community is powerful" stick. So no, this segment concludes that TF2 isn't a dead game, nor is it a dying game despite what YouTube might have you believe. You can still play the game and the community is more than enough to keep it alive, even though Valve is rather stubborn. I think Fixed TF2 actually put it the best. TF2 isn't a dying game, not by a long shot. It's a game that is being killed, even though they are kind of bad at it. So, I think I've talked long enough about different kind of scenarios to come with some kind of proper conclusion on this specific matter. Now, what really kills a game? What leads a game to a point where it no longer really exists? As mentioned, single player games are kinda hard to kill. You're gonna need to kill the cartridge itself to actually kill the game. Yet, of course, the popularity can dwindle from day 1 to day 2. And that is the problem that multiplayer games faces. Games that need a player base to work. Now, the player base will always rise and fall as time goes on. But two factors that really seem to have to be in order for a game to be stable, attractive, and playable is the development team, who have to make the game work on the inside, fix issues and update the game, and then the community, which has to keep the game alive on the outside, spreading its popularity and preserving its popularity, and of course, making people want to enjoy the game even outside of the game. Now, the community can have a slight effect on the inside of a game, and development can have a huge impact on the outside of a game, like, this game? Yes, because of these guys. But mainly, it's just a two-man job. These two factors have to work, preferably together, to get the game to rise. If one is missing, the game can still continue, but it isn't really going to rise. With no active or known community, it'll be harder for a game company to sell its games, but not impossible. With no active development team, the game is in a state of limbo, even if the community is active and begging for some activity. If both fade, then the servers is probably already emptying out as we speak. So no, a dead game is not just a game you dislike or haven't played in a few months. It's far from being that. It's a kind of trifecta, with these two being the most important thing. Now, all this meandering about dead games does make a question pop into my head. Can a game be revived? Can I take a game from my childhood and Frankenstein that bitch back into existence? Can you bring a game back from the dead? Well, the obvious question is just yes. In principle, that isn't impossible, but it is rather hard. Although that answer is boring. I want to see if it is possible, or if it even has been done before, and if it will ever happen again. If we take that knowledge we've just figured out about what kills a game, then perhaps we can use it to reverse the killing part and revive it. I mean, we've seen Minecraft getting a lift in popularity after being in a dark place. We've seen RuneScape going from an extremely popular game to a game with an extremely low player count to a well-played game again. Star Wars Battlefront 2 has apparently gone from a dying game to a playable game, and many other such cases. Scenarios, I sound like Trump there, sorry. However, I'm talking about games that are as good as dead. All these games always existed, but I want to see a game come back from the proper dead to an at least okay playable state. where both the community and the overseeing of the game returns, having a game make a comeback as in going from dying to thriving. In principle, it sounds pretty easy, as it's just a few issues and some things you have to fix and revive these two before the game can begin to grow again. Now, reviving a game does seem like a bit of a weird thing. I mean, surely there must be a reason why the game died in the first place, right? But for a game to return, there must be a reason for it in the first place. And these reasons have to appeal to either the people who play the game or the people who own the game. But perhaps these two reasons can go hand in hand. The only thing a fanbase really wants from a game is to simply enjoy it. It's really that simple. And I think everyone has a game that they used to enjoy a lot, but now don't play for whatever reason. Maybe because it just wasn't the same anymore. Now, for a game company, the joy of their fanbase is really something that they don't really care about. And if they do, then it's all tied to the one thing that all companies truly want: an influx of cash money. This is both the problem and somehow also the potential solution. A fanbase couldn't really give a toss about how much money the game developers and producers make on the game, and a game company couldn't really care less about what people actually think of their games. However, if a company really wants their game to sell, then they would care about how the people feel about the game, to make sure that the game actually sells. And if a fanbase really wants to enjoy a game, then they would pay the price of that game, whatever it might cost. I know that's business 101, but alright, that was just business 101, I'm sorry. When it comes to asking the question, should this game be revived, it would have to come from the game companies, wondering if they can revamp the game for profit. So, if the game is to be revived, then the community and development's interest in the game would have to be revived somehow. Yet it seems that the more important part of this duo when it comes to reviving games is the dev team. There will pretty much always be some sort of fan base around a game, no matter how small or big it is. But there isn't always going to be a reason for a company to keep the game going and keeping it alive. If a company is to restart a game, if not an entire franchise, then the company must be certain that the game would actually make sense to revive. I mean, it did die in the first place. To explain an example of this, I would like to go back to the Mario and Luigi series, since the end of this franchise is an interesting case. Yeah, hi, hello, editing Dane here, just to tell you that, yes, again, the release of Mario and Luigi Brothership kinda ruined the scripts. So just imagine this bit coming from someone who hasn't seen the game come out yet. And you can see that I predicted the game coming out. I'm a fucking genius. But anyways, continue watching now, haha. Most people have the opinion that since Alpha Dream is bankrupt and therefore no more, then the Mario and Luigi series is also just dead, since surely they own the right to it. Well, no, in fact Nintendo owns the rights to all the Mario and Luigi games. It is, after all, Mario. So there isn't even a single chance that a slither of that Mario gold is slipping their hand. Like a goddamn dragon, Jesus. Nintendo could, if they wanted to, restart the franchise and make more games for the series, entirely relaunching the Mario RPGs, which I know many people would like, but again, only if Nintendo would find the move profitable. You have to remember that the series ended on a huge flop. Actually, 2 huge flops. So why would Nintendo risk profit and time on a game whose last few titles have been flops? And one of the reasons why Alpha Dream went bankrupt. Well, for some weird reason, it does seem that Nintendo does see some profit in Mario and Luigi RPGs. Or at least Mario RPGs. They have begun to experiment on older Mario RPGs like a remake of Super Mario RPG and Paper Mario A Thousand Year Door. And most importantly, a questionnaire about how much people actually enjoyed the Mario and Luigi series. Now, this isn't really saying a lot, but it is the beginning of a revamping in some sense. If the theory that both the community and the company have to agree on revamping a franchise, then this might just be the beginning. Nintendo is testing the waters to see if there is still profit in making a new RPG game. Now, this doesn't mean that they are gonna make new games. They might just be going to make new remakes or just new RPGs as a whole. Just not related to Mario and Luigi at all. But it is nonetheless the start of a move like that. But again, this is a franchise we're now talking about and not a game. It's such a blue ball with all these weird questions that seem to zigzag through the actual question. I just think it's important to say that mostly a lot of things can be revived when it comes to this industry. When it comes to actually reviving a game from the dead, it seems that it's not really something that has been truly done before. You might find some articles about how No Man's Sky literally revived itself along with others, and while it might have fixed a bunch of problems, it was never really dead. In principle, it shouldn't be impossible to revive a game from the dead, but I think the deadlock between the community and the company is just too hard to overcome, especially since both sides always could just move towards a new game. It simply seems to be too much of a gamble to revive a truly dead game, or sometimes even a dying or abandoned game. Releasing a new game is always more safe than trying to invest in a game which died, again, most likely for a reason. The same goes for the fanbase. At some point, even the most loyal fan would have to accept reality that yes, perhaps this series is just not gonna go any further than this, and yes, this game might just not be playable anymore. Truly dead and abandoned games with no active community and no development interest at all doesn't seem to have ever come back from the dead. Is this an extreme way of judging when a game can be revived? Yes, but I also want it to be useful. I don't want this to be a scenario that's just like, ooh, can a game be popular again? Yes, obviously. But can a game be revived again? That's a totally different question, and I don't want this to be another nothing burger video on YouTube. For a game to be truly revived from the dead, it would have to be dead. But at that point, it is already too late. The game is gone, and it would make more sense to just move on and make another one. You can't make something out of nothing in this scenario. There has to be a slight slither of development or fanbase for a game to grow in to make a comeback. If both sides have completely given up, then there's not only no chance of it coming back, but no one would want it to come back. That's a problem. Again, in theory, this isn't impossible, but things are often different in reality than they are on paper, in this scenario at least. A game can be a lot of things before it truly dies out. It can be abandoned but still not dead. It can be lacking a fan base but still be active. For it to be dead, or at least dying, it, again, has to be the overseeing and the fan base of the game that has to go away. But if both sides completely disappear, then it's more likely not coming back again, because have you ever seen a game go from such abandonment to then coming back at all? We've seen a bunch of different games tempting the limbo of life and death, with many different outcomes, rather be good or bad. While we perhaps haven't seen a star example of a game going from total abandonment to thriving again, we've seen many different scenarios which could be close enough, and especially useful in questioning the revival of a game. We've seen some games going from very popular to then going down a ditch, to then making a comeback in a new golden age, if you could say that. We have seen some series which people were sure were dead, to then make a surprise comeback. We've seen some games which simply refused to die, and then some which perhaps were doomed to fail from the very beginning. We have seen some games go from gaming to a different medium, like a series, which I didn't even talk about in this video, mainly because it goes outside the realm of a video game and something else, but it still shows that a game can come back in many different ways. This video started out mainly shutting down all those people who say that games are dead even though they clearly aren't, but the video evolved into something else. There is so much one can learn about the lifespan of a game and how it evolves, but one thing that can be certain is that one should never give up on a game. They will always have ups and downs, but they can always make a comeback. It's all about those who wanted to see it be continued. Games also die out all the time. Even the biggest classics will someday fade out, like some already have. So now you should know a bit more about what kills a game, or what can eventually revive it. And most importantly, you hopefully aren't gonna call well-loved games dead just because they slightly changed in a way you didn't like. No, seriously, stop calling well-loved games dead. It's such an annoying thing.